So I found yesterday's post from President Trump very interesting on many agree/disagree levels. That post said, and I quote, "The Washington whatevers should immediately, all caps, change their name back to the Washington Redskins football team." There is a big clamoring for this. Likewise, the Cleveland Indians, one of the 6 original baseball teams with a storied past. Our great Indian people in massive numbers want this to happen. Their heritage and prestige is systematically being taken away from them. Times are different now than they were 3 or 4 years ago. We are a country of passion and common sense. All caps. Owners, get it done with 3 exclamation points. And later, President Trump doubled down social media by threatening to derail the Washington football team's attempt to rebuild the stadium on the grounds inside of old RFK Stadium, a stadium I went to way more times than I hate to admit. I used to call it the rickety field for knuckleheads during that rivalry. Those Redskins from, 1982 to 1991, went to 4 Super Bowls and won 3. Okay. Now allow me, as a lifelong diehard Dallas Cowboy fan and as a native of Oklahoma, to break down what I agreed with and what I do not agree with in President Trump's post about the Redskins. For the record, I remain outraged over what white people, believing themselves to be God's people, did to the original settlers of what became America. My state of Oklahoma originally was the land the U.S. government gave to the 5 civilized tribes after our soldiers conquered them and forced them to move from their homes in the southeast portion of this country to reservations in what eventually would become the state of Oklahoma. And by the way, that's a term from the Choctaw language that means red man or red people, Oklahoma. Thousands from these 5 tribes in the deep South were forced to walk all the way to Indian Territory in Oklahoma, and thousands died along the way in what became known as the Trail of Tears. Look it up. Worse, we shrank the land given to those 5 civilized tribes when we in the state of Oklahoma opened up Indian Territory to white homesteaders in what was called the Land Run of 1889. So where did the nickname University of Oklahoma Sooners come from? Well, Sooners were those who jumped the gun the night before, crossed the land run line on the Kansas-Oklahoma border, and under the cover of darkness, staked out the best home plots and lots. Yep, the football team I grew up loving, the OU Sooners, was nicknamed for those who cheated, and the entire land run was cheating the 5 civilized tribes out of some of the land that was promised to and originally given to them. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of naive white settlers were heading west feeling entitled to any and all the land that had already been settled by fiercely proud tribes from the Comanches out to the Apaches. We started arrogantly building homes on their land And did they ever start fighting back? I remain on their side. Maybe the best nonfiction book I've ever read is Empire of the Summer Moon. I highly recommend it if you got the stomach for it. It's about the war between the Comanches and the U.S. troops. Unspeakable atrocities were committed by both sides. We ultimately prevailed, but throughout the book, I couldn't help but root for them. I grew up around many of what then were called Indians. Why Indians? Because Columbus was so off course that when he landed in the Caribbean, he thought he was in the East Indies nearing India, so he started calling the indigenous people Indians. What? Our original settlers were misnamed Indians because the man who discovered America thought he was in India? How stupidly wrong was that? I grew up watching cowboy versus Indian movies in which the Indians were always portrayed as the evil villains and often referred to as those no good Redskins. To me, Redskins remains a racist nickname. I mean, what if an NFL team had been nicknamed the Blackskins? But here is the nuance. The Redskins were clearly feared across the West. In the book I mentioned, Empire of the Summer Moon, the Comanches are called the greatest light horse cavalry in the history of the world. These were bareback riders firing dozens of arrows a minute. Never been anything like them. So I grew up hating but fearing the Washington Redskins because to me, the real Redskins, the Comanche, the Apache, the Sioux, ask Custer about the Sioux, were some of the mightiest warriors in the history of this planet. It took about 100 years for thousands after thousands after thousands of our soldiers with superior weaponry to finally overcome and civilize those mighty warriors. I must admit, I came to love/hate the nickname Redskins because Cowboys versus Redskins was literally the story of the country. The Redskins were literally representing the capital of the United States of America, and somehow deep down, I actually liked that. In a way, as racist as the term was and is, it also represented a people we had done so wrong, a people who had fought so bravely, so skillfully, so intelligently for so long. Seriously, all I ever wanted to be as a little kid growing up in Oklahoma was an Indian brave. They had to earn their manhood, had to learn how to survive in the wilderness, had to be ready and able to fight to the death. That's what I wanted to be. Truth be told, every time I now refer to the Washington football team, I come very close to saying that word that almost sounds now like a taboo word that you can't say. I'll say it now for the sake of this. Redskins. Every single time I almost say Redskins. It's part of my psyche. I grew up with it. Cowboys versus Redskins, the best rivalry in pro football. Every time I say the nickname Commanders, I just flinch because it's just so dumb. Now that Jaden Daniels has this team on the verge of going to the Super Bowl, they almost got there last year. I won't be shocked if they get there this time. But now that that's on the verge, Commanders just sounds dumber than ever to me. I just can't say it. Now I just try to say Washington without using any nickname. Washington. For that matter, Guardians is equally ridiculous to me when referring to Cleveland's baseball team, even though I don't consider Indians as racist as Redskins. I don't know, maybe some indigenous people do consider Indians as racist as Redskins, which brings me back to my point from the start about these nicknames. President Trump, I'm going to repeat, said in his post, our great Indian people in massive numbers want this to happen. Their heritage and prestige is systematically being taken away from them. Well, it has been taken away, past tense. So if someone can conclusively demonstrate that a majority of tribal leaders across America are all for the return of Redskins and Indians as team nicknames, then I would be all for it. We went through this a number of years ago, back in my first take days. Some tribal leaders would speak out pro and some would speak out con. I just don't know. But if you showed me that a consensus were now pro, I'm just hoping this will at least spark a new wave of debate. I'm hoping tribal leaders everywhere will just stand up and speak out on this starting now. Whatever their consensus opinion is, if there is a consensus, and maybe there isn't, but I'll stand behind the majority. Maybe I'm just being just another naively arrogant white person, but I must admit I do miss Washington, D.C.'s NFL team being called the Redskins.